Hello and welcome back to Champions and Beyond. In this video we are taking another look at what you receive within an expansion pack of Marvel Champions. Now generally this is kind of my buyer's guide series. We are going to talk about the Wrecking Crew scenario pack today. This may be more of a buyer's beware guide, especially when you're getting into the game. And I will go into a little bit more detail when we go through what you actually receive. So within the expansion pack you get another nice little booklet just going through how to set up the Wrecking Crew, because this was the first multi-villain scenario, and some additional rules and that sort of thing. Now the Wrecking Crew came out February the 7th 2020, so we are coming up to this product being out for 4 years. Kind of looking at it now, some things I want to say in its favor. The game had only been out November, I think it was, so no, it might not have been, it might have been October, but yeah, it had only been out about 5 or 6 months. It had been out around about that length of time. This was the 6th scenario ever released. You had the 3 in the core set, you had the 2 Green Goblin scenarios. This was scenario number 6. There were only 7 heroes out at this point. There was the 5 from the core set, there was Captain America and Miss Marvel. So there wasn't a lot of choice when it came to Marvel Champions at this point. And this was, as I said, their first attempt at a multi-villain scenario. And as you can see, you had separate hit dials for them, and you set them up. They all had their own encounter decks, as well as their own side scheme, and you had the main scheme. Now, overall, that's not too bad. I know there are a lot of people that complain about how long it takes to set up the Wrecking Crew. I don't think it really takes that long, but there are definitely other problems with the scenario. So this pack, because there were 4 villain decks, there was no room in the pack for additional encounter sets or really anything else to modularize your game. So the way that the set came, you had a single card main scheme, and one of the biggest problems with this scenario that makes it a little bit easy is that they missed a symbol off. So it finishes when there is 6 per player threat on the main scheme. However, so this goes 6, 12, 18, 24, depending on player count. However, you only go up 1 threat per turn. So in a 4-player game, you would kind of have 24 turns. Now, that isn't 100% accurate, because there are all the different decks, and you do add an acceleration token on every time you go through one of the villains' decks. So in multiplayer you can suddenly add a lot of acceleration tokens onto the main scheme. But just the fact that it doesn't scale by adding threat per player on kind of made it, especially in solo, it made it very easy for you to pretty much ignore the main scheme throughout the course of the game. Now, you got your single main scheme. You got the 4 villains. So you had Wrecker, you had Thunderball, you had Piledriver, and you had Bulldozer. So the way that each of the villain sets came was you had an A and a B villain. So this was standard and expert. Now they did experiment, so they did say that you could technically try to increase and decrease your difficulty. So if you thought all the A sides were too easy, you could just swap out Wrecker into his B side. So you're playing Expert Wrecker, but standard with the rest of them. So there was some modularity that way. I don't know if everyone kind of did it, or if many people really did it. I know I tried the first couple of times I played it, but then you either choose A or B. That's kind of how it goes. Each villain has a side scheme. So part of the reason you can ignore the main scheme is because whenever any of these villains scheme, they add it to their side scheme instead of the main scheme. And when these side schemes pop, they do something bad to you. So, for example, Wrecker, he would deal 2 damage to each player. I think it's 2 indirect damage to each player. So, you know, it hurts if you let it pop, but generally they're not too bad. You can deal with what happens. They then had 15 different encounter cards, including like signature weapons and all that sort of thing. Within each deck, there were only 2 minions, and the Corrupt Prison Guard schemes for 0. The Escaped Convict scheming for 1 is the only way to add additional threat onto that main scheme when you are playing. The rest of the cards team off each other. They give some stat boosts. It will be trying to swap. Like, it does quite a good job, really. If you watched our live stream a little while ago of Hulkpool and Deadpool, you will have seen quite a few times where one villain is giving you an encounter card and it's actually swapping the active counter onto someone else and causing them to do something else. Now, obviously, I want to go through all the heroes and all the villains with another person. I want to do it where we've got 2 of us chatting and really talking through the cards. So I'm not going to go through in detail all of the cards that they have. But this may be more of a buyer's beware guide. Because during this encounter, as it's written, you don't add in the standard or the expert cards. You don't add in any modules. You don't even add in your obligation. So there's no way to see your obligation. There's no way to see your nemesis. There's no way for any of the core things that you expect within Marvel Champions to really appear. And because there isn't that modularity, it also makes it quite difficult as far as a replayability standpoint goes. Now, I still enjoy this scenario. It is way down on my list. I will not pull it out very often. I think I've pulled it out twice this year, and once was to do the Hulkpool stuff with it, and the other time was, I don't know, maybe halfway through the year where I thought, let's just play them again to get the use out of them. As you saw within the Hulkpool stuff, there is nothing to say that you can't pick out a few choice cards and shuffle a couple into each deck. It's not going to massively over or underbalance the scenario. There is definitely some combos that I've been playing around with whenever I get them out, like adding in the advances, adding in the assaults, adding in Shadows of the Past. Obviously with the pool aspect, we added in the Dreadpool module set, and it works. Now, if you're not prepared to put that effort in, or to try and think of some cool combos, I mean, there are a ton of criminal minions which makes sense for them to be in jail, even if you pull from Nemesis sets. So I can't remember if Vulture is a criminal, but I think he is. Baron Zemo is a criminal. The big bad Tombstone from the modular set from the Green Goblin, he is a criminal. Not Bug, but Beetle, Wasp's nemesis, is a criminal. There were also other criminal modular sets that came out later. So for a thematic sense, you could always add in some criminals. You could get experimental weapons and add in one experimental weapon into each deck, because that is a 4-card module set. You could even play around with the Power Stone that comes in Galaxy's Most Wanted as a module that will flip back and forward and possibly go on different villains as you're attacking and taking attacks and attacking them back. So there are options, but it isn't easy to make the scenario feel different. So because of that, it is very difficult for me to recommend this, especially until you've got everything. Now, one thing I do want to point out, all of the abilities on the cards, on the side schemes, are basically the abilities of the Horsemen, the 4 Horsemen scenario that will be coming out in Age of Apocalypse. So it's quite easy to see that Fantasy Flight have improved on this scenario. They are going to do that with the next big box expansion. And hopefully they execute it a bit better. Now, this was very early on in the life cycle, and if they hadn't tried this now, maybe we wouldn't have had the Tower Defense scenario or the Sinister Six scenario or the upcoming Horseman scenario. You know, any of those scenarios that give you multi-villain play, if this hadn't been released, we probably wouldn't see those, and we wouldn't see those to the level that they are at now. And they are some very fun scenarios. So if you are just getting into the game, if you are looking at spending your money, the Wrecking Crew would be the last of the scenario packs that I would suggest getting. Every other scenario pack will either give you multiple scenarios within it, the likes of Green Goblin and Mojo, or they will give you a bunch of modular sets or a really interesting gameplay. I know it sounds like I'm being very negative against the Wrecking Crew, and they do still hold a place in my heart, and I will still get them out every now and then. But at the same time of us really enjoying what we get, we have to sometimes acknowledge where there are some low points in the game. And unfortunately, Wrecking Crew is one of those low points of the game. If you have everything else and you do want to try them out, then yes, see if you can get hold of them. There isn't really any reason to fully avoid the pack, especially if you like the Wrecking Crew as a team. There's definitely going to be something for you there. I would rate this at about a 6. Now, considering I rate Marvel Champions kind of across the board as a system as a 10, you can see how disappointing this set is, to myself anyway. Now, I've rambled on quite a lot without really fully going into detail of the villains and everything, so I'm going to sign off there. But please let me know what you think. Do you completely agree with me? Do you have any combos that you like to mix in with the Wrecking Crews, just to try and make it a little bit different whenever you play them. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. And until next time, try and stay positive. Happy gaming.